Story number 1. My parents and Dan were back sooner than I thought. And they wanted money this time. This will not surprise some people who commented on my previous posts, because my parents did some of the exact things they said they would. Which was wanting either my money or my signature. I did expect the classic lines of narcissists saying that I owed them, or give me some kind of socialist BS of sharing the wealth. But that was just my imagination running wild. The ensuing situation was somewhat similar to that. But much more tame, I guess you could say. They seem to know not to push me too far now. And were mostly aiming for pity. It began when my parents recently got in touch with me through social media, and asked for a meeting in a public place of my choosing. It just screamed trap. But I wasn't afraid. In fact, I was amused. They know I'm not to be fucked with anymore. So, I could only wonder what they wanted this time. I picked a local restaurant that may have a name of an olive and a garden in it, and we met up there. Dan was with them. But he kept his mouth shut, most of the time. We had awkward greetings, ordered some drinks, and then cut to the chase. My parents begged me to help Dan get his own apartment so he could finally move out. Apparently, Dan's credit isn't so great. Gee, I wonder why. Could it be his wife regularly spends him into a hole? Well, they asked that I help by either supplying some capital, or by co-signing for the apartment and helping to pay the rent for it. I simply said no to both. That's when Dan spoke up in anger and yelled at me that I have so much, and I don't have a family to support like he does. He needed my help, and I should be sparing the money for his family since I don't have one myself. I laughed and asked where they were when I needed their help. That's right. They were pointing and laughing at me for being homeless. Or should we go further back to my childhood? I'd love to delve into that with plenty of ears to listen in around us. My mother grabbed my hand and begged me not to speak of any of it. My father and Dan both just looked away and said nothing. Pretty sure they wanted to say something like they used to at me, but held their tongues. I asked them if they thought I was rich or something. And their looks said it all. And when I told them I don't have that kind of money, they looked at me like deer in headlights. I broke it down about how much I'd managed to save for the down payment on my house, and the way I had to live and work in order to save that much so fast. And then how I spent nearly all of it on the down payment of my house. I'm still in financial recovery. I did have monthly income to spare, yes. But most of it was going right into my savings. I asked Dan what his yearly salary was, and when he told me, I pointed out that it was actually a bit higher than mine. I then loosely broke things down in rough math in front of my parents on how about 70% of my income goes to my mortgage, insurance, gasoline, internet, phone, food, and other bills. And then there's maybe 30% of that left at most that I can put into savings. And I need that money saved to get back on my feet in time. And I have to make sure I have savings to fall back on. My truck is from the 90s. If it were to break down, I'd need money to either fix or replace it. And there's other things one would need a rainy day fund for, like home repairs, doctors, taxes, lawyers, or anything in general you'd need quick cash for when it's a sudden unexpected expense. So, as you can see, I just can't spare money for Dan. And I also refuse to co-sign for anything as that would leave me on the hook for any bill Dan couldn't or wouldn't pay. Then I pointed out that that's likely why my parents didn't co-sign for Dan's apartment themselves long ago. And my mother just started crying again. I was pretty much one step ahead of them in all of this. I'm not an ATM, and I'm not a fool. And I stated that right to their faces. I expected my father to become angry with me like he always does. But this time he just, well, didn't. I've known this man to explode on me for the slightest provocation of not enabling my brother all of my life. But this time he just didn't do that. There wasn't even a sneer on his face. The only way I could describe the look he had was regret and defeat. Maybe regret for being a shitty parent. Or maybe regret because he can't bully me around anymore. Who knows? Either way, my parents couldn't really argue with me, and I wasn't about to give them any money. Dan just got up and said this was all just a waste of their time, and that he was leaving. My mother started apologizing for him, but Dan still wanted to leave. Then, just to kill with kindness, I offered to buy them a round of unlimited soup and salad while we were all there. I guess they couldn't turn down free food since we hadn't ordered anything but drinks yet, and they stayed. I went out of my way to talk about anything other than money. Dan remained quiet, and was either eating his food or looking at his phone. But my parents just awkwardly talked with me. They brought up that they've recently joined a local Christian church. And that they'd already been going for the last 2 weeks. I said, good for them, and they of course started trying to advertise that they'd like me to go too. I simply said no thanks, and they were smart enough not to push further. When the meal was finished, Dan left a $10 on the table for the tip and walked off without saying another word to me or anyone. My mother just excused his behavior and we all parted ways. That was about it. Not nearly as much drama as I thought there'd be. But this is still far better than how things used to be with my parents and brother. As for Asael, well, she's been regularly complaining online about my parents. She really doesn't seem to like the fact that she's not queen bee of their house. And I think her toxic is finally getting to them. Why else would they be so desperate to come crawling back to me? Asael actually wants my parents to move into a camper like I had to do in order to make space in the house. And she's being told no every time. She does seem to have a following of Karen-minded people like her though. Because here and there I get messaged by someone I don't know, that are intent on raging at me for not giving up my house for Asael. I don't bother to argue with these people anymore. I just block and move on. Though there was one persistent troll who had my phone number. And they call from a different number every time. Yes, it seems to be the same person who called me to say I need to make way for a real family man like Dan. But I could care less. The calls, though, seem to have slowed down, if not maybe stopped. Because I made it clear to that person that they were only amusing me by keeping this up so long. The last time they called was around the beginning of the month. And it's been silence from them since then. Story number 2. A wild Karen and Karen Jr. encounter. So, this just happened and I'm still shaking my head. For some context, I'm autistic, and really don't handle confrontation well. However, I'm currently training my border collie, Storm, to be a psychiatric assistance animal. We are so very close to him being fully certified, but for the moment, our trainer and I organize passes for us to both go to buildings, planes, trains, etc., so I can expose him to different environments, sounds, smells, etc. Today we were getting on a train to the city, 1 hour 15 minutes ride. We got on at the front next to the guard, showed him the approval letter stating Storm is in training, and all was good. We boarded, and Storm laid under my legs taking up minimal room as per his training. We get to the first stop and in comes a Karen, K, and her younger daughter, Karen Jr., KJ. They both sit on the other side of the aisle, next to me. After a few minutes, KJ notices Storm laying under my legs and says to K, "Mum, that man has a dog, can I pat it?" And she replies with something along the lines of, "Just ask," but I can't be 100% certain as I wasn't actively paying attention. Next thing I know, I hear, "Excuse me," from KJ, and the following conversation ensues. KJ, "Could I pat your dog?" Me, "No sorry, he's currently training and can't be pet." KJ, "What do you mean he's training?" Me, "He's training to be an assistance animal, and it's very important that no one interferes with him." K, "Come back sweetie." Unfortunately, some people don't know how to share. I tried to remain calm, but Storm instantly knew my anxiety was flaring up, so he got up and comforted me as he is trained to do. I reward him with a treat, a "good boy," and finally the lathe command, at which point the Karen approached us. "K, you should be teaching him to interact with children. My daughter just wanted to give him a pat, and you rewarding him for ignoring her is just plain rude." Me, "Excuse me. He's working, and currently in training." I rewarded him for responding to me appropriately, not for ignoring your kid. "Leave us alone please." K, "You're lying. He's not a Labrador. They're the only dogs that are smart enough to become assistance animals. He looks like a border collie. They are just farm dogs, so quit lying." At this, my anxiety was starting to peak, and Storm got up and sat on my lap to comfort and calm me down. I reached for my treats pouch, and began to get a treat out, when Karen reached in and took a treat before me, handing it to Storm. K, "Good boy." Me, "Get away from me." I screamed and began crying. The train came to an unscheduled stop at the next station and a group of police officers got on. K and KJ were moved to the next carriage, and we continued on, with an officer staying with me until the next station. Fast forward to the end of the line, and we got into the city. As I was talking to the guard, who had actually organized for the police to join us, K and KJ saw us. KJ ran up to us, and just as I saw her hand reach out and down, I gave Storm the command, "Other side." He swiftly moved behind and to the left side, away from her. Me, "I told you no." KJ, "My mum said I could, so let me." With that, she tried to pull his leash out of my hand. I dropped the lead and gave Storm the command, "Danger," to which he ran and sat under a seat in the middle of the platform. Karen then enters, pushing me on the shoulder, and by this stage, my fight or flight response was the only thing in control, and I pushed her back, knocking her to the ground. More police were on the platform in what felt like seconds. I called for Storm as they arrived, handed them his paperwork and told them everything that had happened. I'm now writing this from inside a police station while waiting to do a victim impact statement. The Karen got arrested for assault and interfering with a service animal.